do that one. I'll just rename it later. Okay.
I was looking at a video of Robin pasting the sign up. This is too funny. Somehow that got on Facebook. God, even when this fails, it's fun.
Funny, I know. Behind the scenes, right? Oh.
What is that? Oh, that's this. Okay.
Oh, there we go. Now I got now. I have all you on Facebook.
Very good.
Okay, here we go again.
Welcome everyone. It is a little late on Monday, about 6:25 to get started, but boy, we're trying so hard. I hope you can hear me better this time. And we thank you so much at home for tuning in and hopefully sticking with us as we try to iron out the difficulties that are pretty much inherent with the first time you try to do something like this technologically. So I wanted to talk a little bit about foster youth who are aging out of the system in the next few months. I mean, this has to be a little bit scary, if not a lot scary. And I've gotten a lot of calls and emails saying, hey, what do I do now? Will I have access to money to live? And I got to tell you, man, this is where foster youth really need us the most. And we can help them by long distance. And I'm going to show you a little bit about that tonight. The first thing I want to say to all foster youth is you are not alone. You can private message me on Facebook. You can email directly to me at greg@ageoutangels.org, and we'll guide you through. We'll guide you through this process, however long it takes, until it's safe for us all to meet in person. Now, one little shining star is the state of Illinois this week, which became the first state to put a moratorium on letting youth age out of foster care, meaning those turning 21 would not see an end to their housing and support during this pandemic. And this comes to us by way of the Chronicle of Social Change. California child welfare leaders have asked the state's Department of Social Services to do the same. Now, last week, the U.S. Children's Bureau told the Chronicle of Social Change that it does not have the authority to waive statutes that limit the program to age 21, unless Congress is willing to write that into a coronavirus legislation. So this is something that could, on a federal level, be written into a stopgap legislation. Now, I'm waiting for a response from the state of New Jersey to find out if they'll extend foster time in the system at least until the crisis passes. And so, word to the wise to foster youth: if you can extend your time, do it. It's not even a question. If you are thinking about not extending your time, unthink that right away. This is no time to demonstrate your self-sufficiency. There are two things that appear obvious. The first is that the government is typically behind the curve, so you can't really count on them. The second is government is as overwhelmed as you are right now, and time is essentially frozen. You're sure as hell not going to sign any discharge papers. No caseworker would risk their life to meet with you to close your case. So hearing nothing, while ordinarily can be a little bit scary, is not the worst thing at this moment, simply because nobody knows what they're doing right now. And most government workers are just hoping this will blow over in the next couple of months. And they're trying to avoid like a Band-Aid legislation that they then have to repeal down the road. They don't want to give anybody anything that they then have to take away. So they're all trying to figure out how to make this thing work. Meanwhile, you have to live. So I want to say a few things right now. If you're facing the financial part of this crisis or advising someone who is, I want you to have a little bit of toolkit to get you going. Number one, getting sick is not the ticket to free room and board. People get weird thinking in desperate times. They try to figure out ways to work the system, and it's bad. Getting locked up, for example, is a bad solution to getting free shelter and free health care. I was in an online meeting a couple of days ago where a person in the group who lives closer to the urban center said that she witnessed many people, especially youth, not practicing disease avoidance. And what I want you to understand here is, they have all these names for it, like social distancing and self-quarantine and all this kind of stuff. But what you're doing, what you need to do is avoid this disease. This is a disease that is in droplets in the air, as best as the scientists have told us. It exists in little droplets in the air, and the whole point of avoiding people is to avoid those little droplets. Now listen, over 10,000 people have died. I got to be honest, there is a part of me that has this, conspiracy theorist inside that says people in charge might not really care that much if poor people die. And that's no reason to let them have their way. I'll give you an example. There's a meeting, and I'll bet you money it's happening somewhere right now. And there's a government analyst, and he's just a working guy, don't blame him, but he's been given a task. And his task is to come up with a number, the number of dollars that welfare will save, depending on the number of poor people who will die. That's happening. Don't think for 1 second it isn't. So stay away from everyone not in your immediate living circle. Stay away from anybody who could possibly pass this virus on to you, because that's the last thing that you want. Now, if you have creditors, and that means your landlord, utility company, anyone expecting a monthly payment from you, first thing you want to do is call them. You follow up that call with an email, but the first thing that you want to do is call them. Explain that you have no money coming in, but if you can, offer them something, a few dollars, anything, just a few dollars. Think about this for a second. Landlords, especially if you happen to live in Section 8 housing, landlords will still get most of their money from the government. Your payment to a Section 8 housing, is not the bulk of that payment. It's a small percentage. Either way, it would take months for you to be evicted. There's no paperwork moving through the courts. Think of it. Everything is frozen in time right now. But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they can do something bad to you. What matters is that you develop a proper business relationship so that in the end, both you and your creditors get what you want, okay? So what you want is to continue getting their credit. What they want is to ultimately be paid. You're on the same team. So if you can send them anything, like if you can send them $5 or $10 or $1 or $20, whatever you have that you can send them, right? That's what will make that relationship stronger and stronger, and set you apart from the people who don't communicate with them. So you call and you follow up the call with an email explaining that you'll try to send something, and remind them that you will pay when life returns to normal, and hopefully you can go to work or go back to work. And so the reason that you do that is because if a company is planning an action against you, sending them anything usually resets that clock. Okay, so that's the way you want to handle the financial end of this. And as we are getting on into this pandemic and we hear from more knowledgeable people, I will bring you more information. And like I said, you're not alone. You can call me at any time and I will help you. Okay, all right. Now, I'm going to skip through the break because we started the show so late, because really what I wanted to talk about is to call your attention to an article in the New York Times on January 20th. The title of the article is "How Much Racism Do You Face Every Day?" and it's written by Amy Harmon. And the subheading says, "To see how your experience with discrimination compares with others, answer some of the questions that were posed to 101 Black teenagers as part of a study measuring the racism they face on a daily basis." And if you're not familiar with this article, or if you're not in this group, this cultural group, I think this will really be eye-opening. Anti-Black bigotry in America can take many forms, some overt and some harder to measure. To find out just how pervasive racism is, a team of researchers tracked the experiences of 101 Black teenagers in Washington, D.C. for 2 weeks. Here are some of the questions presented to the teenagers. See how your experience compares. Like, here's a question. How many times were you mistaken for someone else of your same race or ethnicity who may not look like you at all? Here's another question. How many times did you see a racist image online, either Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or in a comment section? Here's another one. How many times did a teacher assume that you were an expert on people of your same race or ethnic background? And if you're not a student, consider a coworker. Now, a couple of those, certainly seeing a racist image online. I guess if you're listening on radio, I should tell you I'm a 65-year-old middle-aged white guy. So if you're out there and you're a Black teenager, you're thinking, well, what does he have to add to this conversation? And, in a lot of ways, you're right. But the weird thing is that I have actually had things like this happen to me in various times over the years. So I kind of have a sense of what it feels like in the moment, although not in the collective, because it has not happened to me in the collective sense. But a racist image online, I don't get. And you know what? It's never been because I'm white. It's always been the Jewish thing that people have taken issue with at various times of my life. So I know that there's a zillion anti-Semitic images being distributed online. I know that they're out there, but Facebook reads my algorithm and doesn't show them to me. But we know that they're there. A teacher assume that you're an expert on people of your same race or ethnic background. I've worked in plenty of corporations where people have asked me how the Jews would feel about what that they were about to do. Like, I speak for the whole collective. Collectively, 101 Black teens participating in the study reported more than 5,600 experiences of racial discrimination over a 2-week period. That boils down to an average of more than 5 instances per day for each teenager. That's more than 70 over 2 weeks. Those findings may not be surprising to those who face routine discrimination, but they reflect a higher frequency of racism that has previously been reported. So what caused the increase? Researchers say that the study was the first to include so many expressions of racial bias, 58 in all, and to ask participants to record them daily. Previous studies have typically asked participants to recall experience from the past, which researchers say is not as accurate. Although there has been an increase in hate crimes during the Trump administration, this study actually measures incidents that occurred when Barack Obama was in the White House. The teens who participated in the study were students at a middle school, a high school, and a summer program in Washington. Those who experienced more instances of discrimination over the 2 weeks also showed more symptoms of short-term depression, the study found, such as difficulty sleeping, loneliness, and anxiety. And that's really what we're getting to the root of when it comes to discrimination in all of its forms, is that it's not something that happens in a moment in time. It's something that sort of leaves an imprint in people's brains. And if you listen to my show every week, you know that can actually transcend generations in DNA. So these studies are becoming more scientific. But part of why these types of microaggressions are so insidious is that a lot of times white people can see them as not real or not a big deal. And that's a quote according to Devin English, a psychologist at Rutgers University who led the study. He goes on to say, but this is showing us the magnitude of discrimination faced by Black adolescents. It's happening all the time, and it's affecting how they feel. Now, full disclosure, I'm trying to get Devin to come on the show. He doesn't want to do that. He doesn't think that this is a discussion that we should be having at this time. It happens that I respect him very much, but I also disagree with that point of view. I think that this is a discussion that we can never be afraid to have. And the fact that we're in very weird times right now doesn't mean that we can't have this discussion, think about it, reflect on it, and maybe come out of this whole pandemic nonsense just a little bit smarter and a little bit more sensitive to to the problems to the real problems that people have. Here's a couple more questions. These having to do with witnessing racism. And I'm going to make a very interesting point at the end of this. How many times did people say things that were untrue about people in your race, ethnic group, online? How many times have I heard jokes about Jews being cheap? Well, clearly not as often as the kids in this survey have heard microaggressions about their race. How many times did you hear about a family member experiencing something they described as racial discrimination? So you come home and the family member tells the story of, "You won't believe what happened today." How many times did you see a peer of your same race or ethnicity teased because of their race and ethnicity? Seeing or hearing about a parent or friend experiencing racial discrimination, this study suggests, had a similar effect on the mental health of participants as discrimination they experienced themselves. Dr. English said that was in line with post-traumatic stress research, which shows that witnessing violence against others can be as damaging as personally experiencing it. Other studies have shown that secondhand exposure to racism, such as killings of unarmed Black men by the police, can harm the mental health of Black Americans. And now, this is something that is actually in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which the DSM-5 is the book that has the required diagnoses in order for insurance to cover, mental health treatment and things like that. And in that, the effects of secondhand discrimination are validated as having an effect, and a traumatic effect, and over and over and over again, that becomes complex trauma and has its own life. Let's look at a few other questions. These having to do with racial teasing. How many times did a peer joke about the negative treatment of Black people in the United States, like jokes about slavery or police brutality? How many times did a peer joke about the texture of your hair because of your race or ethnicity? How many times did a peer tease you because of your skin tone? I hope you're answering these questions at home. Racial teasing is common among adolescents, and often it's seen as harmless. But previous studies have shown that it can lead to increases in anxiety symptoms for Black adolescents. In the research team's interviews with Black teens, Dr. English said being teased about hair and skin tone was cited as a frequent way they were treated differently because of their race. One Black teenager gave an example of being asked by a white friend, "Why don't you like chocolate cake? Is it because it's the same color as you?" Measuring microaggressions. Here's some questions that respond to that. How many times were you watched closely or followed around by security guards or clerk at a store or mall because of your race or ethnicity? And every single person of color will tell you that it's almost impossible for them to walk into a store without being followed. How many times did you encounter people who were surprised that you, given your race or ethnic background, did something really well? Well, we've all heard that, huh? You're one of the good ones. How many times did a peer point out that you fit a stereotype of your race or ethnicity? In recent years, social scientists have debated the impact of commonplace, sometimes unintentional expressions of bias known as microaggressions, with some arguing that they represent largely harmless behavior misinterpreted as hurtful. The study suggests that microaggressions occur an average of several times a week for adolescents and are linked to an increase in depression. One teenager told the researchers that white students expected him to be good at basketball because he was black and tall. Another recalled a teacher telling his predominantly black class to get educated or go to the penitentiary. So we have a little bit of time left, not a ton, but there are 58 different forms of racism that were categorized in the study. The averages reflect how many times the 101 black teenagers have experienced such behavior over 2 weeks. And as we go through these, if you think of others that we've missed, I'd love to have you call in 609-807-2492. You can write to me on Facebook. I'm going to take a quick look on Facebook and see if anybody put any questions in there. Lorene Wilkinson is with us. Rashida Abdullah has joined our conversation. So glad to have you guys here. And so, get a pencil and paper or whatever it is you used to write on these days. How many times did people exclude you from a website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or a comment section? That's question number one. People said they had experienced that 6 times over a 2-week period. How many times did people show you a racist image online? Amazing, but that's 10 times. That's more. How many times did people threaten you online? That's 6 times. Oh, people get bold online, don't they? How many times did people say mean or rude things to you about online because of your race and ethnicity? That was also 6. How many times did people crack jokes about people of your race or ethnic group online? That was 8. How many times did you witness people saying mean or rude things about another black person's race or ethnicity online? That was 10 times. How many times did people say things that were untrue about people in your race or ethnic group online? That was 9. How many times did you witness a peer being made fun of because their race or ethnicity? That was 7 times. Witness a peer being made fun of because of their race and ethnicity. Have we not grown out of any of these? How many times did you see a peer of your same race or ethnicity teased because of their race or ethnicity? 4 times. One of the lowest. How many times did you overhear or were told an offensive joke or comment because of your race or ethnicity? That was 5 times. How many times did you overhear a peer telling jokes about black people? That was 6 times. How many times did a peer tease you because of your race or ethnicity? That was 5 times. How many times did a peer joke about the negative treatment of black people in the United States, referring to slavery or police brutality? 8 times. 8 times. How many times, wow, did a peer joke about? How many times did a peer tease you because you wear your hair natural? 4 times. How many times did a peer joke about the texture of your hair because of your race or ethnicity? That was 6 times. How many times did a peer tease you because of your skin tone? 6 times. How many times did a peer joke about your race or ethnic background? 7 times. How many times did you hear about a family member experiencing something they described as racial discrimination? And that was 6 times. How many times did you hear about a friend experiencing something they described as racial discrimination? That was 9 times. Now remember, those last 2 things, one was family member, the other was friend. 9 times a friend experiencing described as racial discrimination. How many times did you hear about a family member being treated poorly because of their race or ethnicity? How many times did you hear about a friend being treated poorly because of their race or ethnicity? How many times were your parents or other family members treated unfairly or badly because of the color of their skin, language, accent, or because they come from a different country or culture? How many times did you see someone lock the doors of their car because of your race or ethnicity? And actually, that's one that's been around for a long time. It's kind of interesting because if you go back about maybe 20 years or so to the time when car locks like sort of bounced up and down off the top of the door, and when the automatic locks came into being, you could actually hear all the locks being locked from the outside of the car. That's how much loudness, how much sound that made. And one thing that black youth used to tell me that really would snap their heads when they're walking down the street is when they'd suddenly hear the sound of those door locks, and of course they would look in the direction of the sound, and what do you think they would see sitting in the car? How many times did the police accuse you of having or selling drugs because of your race or ethnicity? How many times did someone misunderstand your intentions and motives because of your race or ethnicity? How many times did you see someone cross the street because of your race or ethnicity? How many times did people look at you like you're a criminal because of your race or ethnicity? How many times were you watched closely or followed around by security guards or store clerks at a store or mall because of your race or ethnicity? How many times were the police verbally abusive to you because of your race or ethnicity? How many times did a teacher have low expectations because of your race or ethnicity? I'm going to finish the list next week and we can talk about it some more. But the bottom line here is, this is something that I have to say, generally speaking, in the suburban community, we are not aware of. It is not something that gets viewed as part of a conversation. It's not part of a dinner conversation. It's not part of educating children. None of it is. And so we have to bring it up here, and you have to bring it up. And whether there's a pandemic or not, when we come out of this, will the same conditions apply, or can we spend some time now to see what we can do about that? Now, I want to take a few minutes and say some final words about a different topic or two. The first is this pandemic is what appears to have taken to finally get some respect for nurses and healthcare professionals. I think nurses have been largely ignored for years and years and years, forever. People are starting to catch on that professions where workers are put in harm's way rate some form of extra love, and that's a good start. And here's the thing. The reason it's a good start is because I want to piggyback that thought with a word about veterans who might be out there saying, what about me? What will it take for me to get some respect? And there's a parallel that we don't draw as Americans, because Americans, we have this tendency to chase the flavor of the month. Remember when the country went nuts over 2,500 children in cages? And rightfully so. But we moved past that to the next cause. And meanwhile, there are still 450,000 kids in foster care who didn't benefit really at all from that tidal wave of caring about children. Okay, so this week it's healthcare professionals, and it should be very rightfully deserved. But in this country, we have a 250-year history of sending soldiers into harm's way. This is what harm's way looks like. It's different, than having bullets fly overhead, but this is exactly what harm's way looks like. But then when we're done, when we've used them up, what do? We totally screw them. We seem to understand harm's way when it's in our backyard. But when it's 3,000 miles away, when it was 3,000 miles away, we didn't even take this pandemic seriously. right? Even politicians went out and said, it's nothing. It's not nothing. Nothing can hurt us. It's 3,000 miles away. Well, guess what? There are soldiers right now today, well, I guess it's tonight where they are, in harm's way, and they're 3,000 miles away. And maybe, just maybe, we can piggyback that thought and understand that harm's way takes many forms, and we can take their cause seriously. Secondly, we have an incredible opportunity right now to reset our social clock and our cultural clock. It's happening right now. Everybody is sequestered in some way, shape, or form. And if you're not, you should be. And that gives us all plenty of time to think. And when we emerge from this, are we going to go right on as though nothing had ever happened? Just when you think nothing good can come of this, and take it seriously because 10,000 people are already dead. But think again. Think what we can do to care for all the people in our society. Think how we, as people, can be that rising tide that helps a family get lifted out of poverty. What can we do that would do that? Could we possibly just take one family and say, let me help this family get a job, get better housing, have proper food, learn about nutrition. Think of how we can help our schools educate our youth. Should we be spending time tutoring young people? We often have this unrealistic expectation that our schools will actually raise our youth, when in reality, they're having enough trouble as it is educating our youth. And right now, I'll bet it's harder than ever. So you have to imagine that all the C students in urban areas, and give me a good C student any day. C students are the ones I love. The A students, they're going to go somewhere regardless. But the C students, they're the ones who need a hand up. Give me a good C student. Guess what? They're going to be allowed to fall out and get social promotions and not learn anything. So what can we do to help our schools? What can we do to help our police if necessary? We also think our police are going to raise our kids. They could use a hand as well. We'll talk more about this next week. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can write to me, Greg, at ageoutangels.org. You can send a comment to Facebook. You can tell me you agree with me. You can tell me I'm the biggest idiot who ever lived. I can handle it either way. I would like to hear your opinion. Thanks so much to Ruben, all the people at Hamilton Radio. Our music is provided by Angel Fire. Webmaster and social media is courtesy of Dover, D-O-V-R. Everybody, stay healthy, please. We're going to meet right back here, same time next week, and let's do our best. I always say let's make this week the best week ever. That's not going to happen. Let's do our best to make this next week tolerable, and let's see if we can think of ways that when this whole thing is over, we can be that rising tide that lifts all boats. Good night, everyone. I'll see you next week.